This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
After a fun game to kick things off on Thursday Night Football, got a loaded slate coming up on Sunday and Monday as well in the NFL. Today, we're going to break down some player props in those games, outline some spots we can identify, players moving into larger roles, what to do with them, talk about how to bet player props in games with high totals, and much more by talking to Annie Nader of FanDuel Research and picking her brain on her top player props across Week 6 in the NFL. This is Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Annie Nader. You can find her on X at anader33. Find her work over at FanDuel Research as well. Annie, we are on to week number 6. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jim. Week 5, very, very exciting. I feel like week 6 got to get really weird. A lot of high totals, a lot of low totals, so I'm excited.
It's a lot of high totals. I have taken unders on several of those, including last night's game, which did not go well for me because Laviska Shenault decided suddenly he's going to be a really good NFL player. And well, we also aided in the over with a fumble earlier on. So I'm a bit worried about how things are going to go with those high totals this week.
Yeah, maybe not a great omen, but we'll see. Yeah.
We will see. But either way, a lot of fun games and a lot of fun ways to potentially get some betting value inside those games. Today with Annie, we're going to talk about how to project players who are shifting into larger roles because there are 1,600 running back injuries this week. I don't know who's going to play, frankly. It's Friday. I've got no idea, which means a lot of props aren't posted at this point just because of that. But also we'll go through that. We'll go through kind of your process in how you want to play things once we get that information. We'll talk about those high total games and how to alter your process within those, yardage props, touchdown props, and a same game parlay Annie likes as well. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Our NFL Week 6 Best Bet show with Dubs Anderson is posted breaking down his thoughts on Commanders Ravens. We talked Lions Cowboys and much more. And also our Week 7 college football preview with Dr. Ed Feng is up as well. Both those on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, but also on this brand new YouTube page where we have all of our Covering the Spread and Heat Check shows streaming live for you Monday through Friday. DFS show is up there as well right now. If you like what you hear, leave us a thumbs up on YouTube, but also hit subscribe to this channel to get notifications as we go live Monday through Friday each and every week. Get ready to tackle the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona, Colorado, DC, Iowa, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, and West Virginia and Wyoming. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Andy, let's begin things with those running backs because we got a lot of dudes who could be shifting into larger roles this week, depending on the health of those starters, which we don't really know as of now. So I want to ask you from a broad perspective, what process do you go through when trying to predict what type of role a guy who is potentially a former backup will play as they shift into a different role because of an injured starter?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I want to look at is like what their role has been as a backup to help kind of gauge how much the team likes them. So what's their volume been as a backup? Have they been getting any early down work? Are they getting considered for any red zone work ever? Or is it more so just a garbage time thing, an injury thing? That'll kind of help us decide, like, okay, the team likes them and is cool with using them this week, or hey, our starter's out this week. We're just going to try to tread water on the ground game and focus more on the passing game and just try to get this through this one. So that's sort of the main thing I want to start with. Like Chase Brown, for example, which it's a bad example now because I guess now he's on the injury report. But
Everyone is.
yeah, but he was already getting intriguing work for the Bengals and was on our radar to kind of usurp Zach Moss. And then now with the earlier news this week that Moss might be out, it's like, okay, I was already probably going to be interested in Brown. Now I'm definitely interested in him. Obviously, everyone's hurt now, so that's maybe not the case. But the main thing here is, like, I don't want to get caught trying to guess too much. Like Chase Brown, we didn't really have to guess with. Like, we saw him getting his work, the uptick in workload. Whereas like someone like Cam Akers, like I'm not going to try to make Cam Akers work just because Joe Mixon is out. So it's kind of like a balance there, and being okay to stay off if I don't feel good about it.
And I think that the key thing you said there is kind of taking the team's signals and kind of reading through that, because before Joe Mixon got hurt, it was Dameon Pierce who was getting work, not Cam Akers. Like Dameon Pierce in week 1 had a couple of carries in that game when Mixon went off. They kind of told you, we don't really care too much about this guy. And when teams tell you those things, we should take it as a signal. Like you said, Chase Brown earning work. Bucky Irving has earned work. Now Rashad White missed practice on Thursday too. So like those guys were getting work to begin with. And I think that importantly for them, they're getting work as both rushers and as receivers. So, rushing plus receiving kind of props for those kind of guys, that could be intriguing too, because the teams have showed us, like you said, that they trust those guys in important situations. And those guys have burst too, which definitely does not hurt things either. Now let's talk about those games with high totals, because we got a bunch of them for this week. As nervous as it makes me, I want to ask you, how does your approach to betting player props shift when you look at these potential shootouts we have on the board for week 6?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to make sure of is like that I don't think that the high total isn't set higher than where it should be, because obviously we're getting props set at lines that are accounting for the total. Then again, it's a tough place to go to unders because a game is being billed as a shootout for a reason. So it's kind of tricky there. I think the main thing is like there's a few different shootouts this weekend or potential shootouts. I just want to figure out which ones I want to get in on and which ones I maybe want to stay off of. Another thing with props, like in these kind of games, it's a good opportunity to kind of get it on the alt markets.
Yeah.
If we're talking about a game that has like a close spread and a total in the 50s, we can probably look for either side's like top wideout to get like 90 plus, maybe 100 plus receiving yards. So that's like one market I like to utilize for these type of games. But yeah.
And I think the key thing you said there is talking about the spread, because that implies it's a back and forth affair. Like that Ravens-Bengals game last week, it was a shootout because both sides are putting up points for all 4 quarters. And if it's a blowout, you're not going to see pedal to the metal for all 4 quarters. And I think that's the key thing for me, is factoring in the spread as well. And we do get that. Like the Cowboys-Lions game has a tight spread too. I think it should be a bit tighter personally in that one as well. But then also you look at the Ravens-Commanders, you need the Commanders to keep pace too. And like, who's going to doubt Jaden Daniels' ability to do that? But it is an important thing to factor in. So I think that mentioning that as you did is important, because that's how you can get those alt markets, is if both teams are pushing for all 4 quarters.
Yeah. And that's kind of we're going to talk about Ravens Commanders later, but that's sort of, we're going to bet on Jaden Daniels this week and try to see if he can keep it close, because ultimately like the Packers have been that way too, where it's like, all right, if their offense is going to score as many points as their defense is going to give up, then let's keep going back there. Although last week wasn't as great as we wanted it to be, but maybe this week. Yeah.
I think they should be okay this week. I'm hoping for it, at least, for sure. All right, Andy, let's take a look here at the markets over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Of the markets that are currently posted, where are you seeing value in the yardage props for this week?
Yeah, let's start off strong and go look at Dalton Schultz.
Love it.
Get pretty fun early on. It's set at 31.5 right now, his receiving.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah, in week 4, Schultz caught 3 of his 5 targets for 34 yards. Then last week he caught 4 of his 6 targets for another 34 yards. This number here seems like closer to what it would be if Nico Collins was playing this weekend, which obviously isn't the case. And we all know what Collins was taking up, like 25% target share, 44% air yard share. And last season, Schultz was typically like a candidate to get a lot more workload when one of the top wideouts was out. He averaged 6.8 targets and 48 receiving yards in 5 games without Tank Dell. He also had 71 and 58 yards in 2 games without Collins. So historically, he's gotten a lot of play when one of Houston's pass catchers are out. They like to look for him. And the Patriots, I know it's like, oh, Patriots are good at defense. I like this total's pretty low, which I don't think should scare us off this yardage prop at all. The Patriots are letting up the 13th most targets and 8th most yards to tight ends this season. So it kind of just feels like this is an all-around great spot for someone who I think has too low of a bar this week.
Yeah, with Schultz, like he hasn't blown up yet, but the past 2 weeks, in week 4, there was no Tank Dell. He's out with a rib injury. And then last week, Nico Collins left early. He still did surpass this number. Like he didn't go nuts, but he had 34 receiving yards in both those games. So sure, I want to make sure check myself from like a DFS perspective that I'm not getting too high on Schultz. He's not an alt market kind of guy, but 31.5 is low enough where like that's a reasonable expectation once you take out a guy who is commanding, 33% of the receiving yards for this team and 26% of the targets or whatever it is for Nico Collins.
Yeah, exactly. Like typically if like you're looking at a receiving prop, maybe you wouldn't be too scared to go to the alt market. Like I'm not going to the alt market with Dalton Schultz ever really, but I really do just like this number where it's at. It just feels a little too low.
Yeah, I am on board with that one as well. So Annie is on Dalton Schultz over 31.5 receiving yards. That is minus 114 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Any other yardage props to stand out to you here, Annie?
Yeah, let's go to this Packers-Cardinals game and look for Marvin Harrison Jr. to bounce back.
I like it. I'm in.
A few low yardage weeks in a row. I feel like they're maybe a bit of overreaction based on that. Set at 56.5 against the Packers in a game that I kind of do think is going to be a shootout. The Packers, like their pass defense ranks 12th right now in number fire. I don't trust them. To me, and maybe I'm just like biased of like, I feel like I met this Jordan Love Packers team when it was like they were young and they were scoring as many points as they're giving up. And I kind of like can't get that out of my head.
Yeah.
But this just feels like it sets up to be a shootout. If it's a shootout at all, it doesn't even have to be a shootout for Marvin Harrison Jr. to pass this prop. He's got a 25% target share, 43% air yard share, averaging 4.6 downfield targets. So when they're passing, he's getting the ball. When they're passing downfield, he's getting the ball. I feel like this is just going to set up as a great environment. I do think there's like a little wind in this one, but that's not going to bother me too much given this number. I feel like the low yardage output in back-to-back weeks has this pretty low in a game that kind of is a smash spot for him. So
I definitely agree with that. And I was surprised, frankly, when I opened this tab and saw the number for Harrison was 56.5. Like Jaden Reed, I adore. Jaden Reed's awesome, but like, should Jaden Reed's yardage number be higher than Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, given that Jaden Reed is competing with 16 different people for targets, whereas Marv is competing with Trey McBride, basically. And also, I think the gap between Harrison and McBride is smaller than it should be, because Marv's role is pretty flawed in that he just kind of runs a lot of go routes, but on a go route, you can get 56.5 on one play.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty enticing. Any consideration for you to alt markets for Harrison, or did the win kind of push you down where you're like, okay, 56.5 is too low, but I don't want to go totally bananas in this spot?
I don't want to go totally bananas, but I do like him at 70 plus yards.
Okay.
I feel like that's
70
a good
plus
number
yards.
for him.
It's a plus 146, not a bad number at all.
Yeah. This feels like the wind is probably going to take me off a game where I otherwise would have maybe considered like 80, 90.
Sure.
But 70 here for how many downfield targets he's getting, how he can get this in like 2 or 3 big plays. That's really intriguing. And this is a game that I think is going to be full of like a lot of big plays. And on one side, we know who the big play is going to. So
and
I think
we've got
70.
no idea on the other side.
Because,
again, way too many mouths to feed there. So check it out, Marvin Harrison over 56.5, minus 114. Some consideration as well for 70 plus receiving yards. That is plus 146 at FanDuel Sportsbook as of right now. Let's talk some touchdown props, Annie. Where are you seeing value there across week number 6?
Let's go to the Commanders-Ravens game.
Let's do it.
And look for Terry McLaurin.
Ooh, I'm in.
I think it was at plus 175. I think it's down to 170 now. Let's see.
It is at plus 170. Yeah. You are correct.
Which is still a number I really like considering how high this total is. I know that it's a 6.5 point spread. Can they keep up? I think we can get it's with Jaden Daniels right now, I at least think it's like they're going to be trying to have a shootout, even if they can't. And McLaurin's role right now, his shares are kind of crazy. 27% target share, 57% air yard share, 15% red zone share, which isn't huge, but definitely not nothing. And Brian Robinson's banged up. He didn't practice much last week, then ended up playing, but was kind of limited. He hasn't practiced this week. It seems like they're kind of doing the same thing where he just might be limited again. He has a 23% red zone target share, so I kind of am taking him being banged up as a little bit of a sign of like, okay, McLaurin could get a little more bump up in those red zone looks. But for how high this total is, if we're expecting a shootout and for how high McLaurin's market shares are, I feel like plus 170 odds here is kind.
I definitely agree because it seems like there's been this trust factor. It's a trust factor in Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, but also a trust factor in Cliff Kingsbury to say, hey, Jaden, let her rip. He's let him throw downfield more now than he was in the past. And all those downfield throws, as you said, are going McLaurin's way. Other thing that I like about this, now we started the show by talking about, hey, I'm a little bit nervous. I got some unders this week, and that's making me a little bit skittish. I do not see an under here. I've got this total at 52.7, which I believe is like one of the 5 highest totals I've ever had since I started running my totals model. It's in part because I do think that this Ravens offense will do a lot of stuff here, but also like it's the Commanders who rank second in number fire schedule adjusted passing offense against the 24th ranked passing defense so far. And that's going to go through Terry McLaurin. And the Ravens have been very good against the run too. It should funnel a bit more to the pass. So I feel like there are a lot of factors that just set up well for McLaurin, being that I do believe in this high total being legitimate, which is something you talked about initially. I think that the Commanders offense should be forced to throw a bit more, and all those factors do kind of combine to make McLaurin a prime target at plus 170.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point you mentioned about like Baltimore's pass defense really has been pretty bad. I think they're ranked 25th right now by number fire, and I think the Commanders are at like 27. So these are two like really bad pass defenses. So
and it's the two best passing offenses through week 5 in the NFL as well. So I am praying this game lives up to its billions. Annie is on Terry McLaurin touchdown plus 170 as they take on the Ravens. All right, Annie, I'm going to give you one same game parlay to place across the entirety of week number 6. Where are you going and why for this week?
I'm going back to the Commanders and Ravens game for pretty much all the reasons we've been talking about. I love a same game parlay for a game that we think could explode. And I'm glad you're on the same page with your total being high. So let's start with the McLaurin touchdown.
Okay, perfect.
That gives us some pretty good odds and some flexibility to take some other things that aren't as high there. So I like adding on Zay Flowers over receiving yards. I think he's at 54.5 right now.
Perfect. And that does correlate well with if we assume that it winds up being a high scoring game.
Yeah, and Flowers, like, this is more just a case of, like, where the total's at, where the Ravens total is at, how bad the Washington's pass defense is. For someone who has a 27% target share, this is a pretty low number.
And if we assume that Terry scores, which is what you're doing with a same game parlay, is you're assuming that the other legs hit. If we assume that McLaurin scores, that increases the odds the Ravens are throwing for all 4 quarters. And if they're throwing it to Zay more often than not.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we got Terry McLaurin, Zay Flowers, SGP currently sitting plus 355. Any more legs? Or are we standing pat with this one?
I like this as a standalone. I also am kind of intrigued in adding a Washington alt spread.
Ooh, okay.
Which, and I think that's more just me trying to get fun because I kind of want the Commanders to stay in this game. Okay. I like them at plus 9.5.
Perfect.
I think it bumps it up to around plus 500.
There we go. Yeah. If you get the Commanders plus 9.5 in there, that is plus 534. So the same game probably for Annie here. Terry McLaurin anytime touchdown, which will correlate well with the Commanders covering that plus 9.5 point spread because it implies they score some points. And if they score points, the Ravens have to throw a bit more, which could push more towards Zay Flowers. So the 3-leg SGP, McLaurin touchdown, the Zay Flowers receiving yardage prop over, and then Commanders plus 9.5 adds up to plus 534. And Annie, a delightful way to enjoy the Commanders versus Ravens by having some action there as well.
Exactly. Let's pray on this one.
Let's pray. Prayer circle for Commanders Ravens to be a true shootout. That is all that we have here for today and this week. Want to give a big thank you once again to Annie Nader for swinging by, breaking down her thoughts on NFL Week number 6 in the player prop market. Annie, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy Ravens Commanders. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Appreciate it. You can find Annie on X at anader33. I'm on X at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. As always, thank you, Justin. Don't forget to check out our NFL Week 6 Best Bets show with Dubs Anderson, College Football Week 7 with Dr. Ed Fang, both up here on this YouTube page and over on the Covering the Spread podcast feed as well. Go subscribe to both of those. Want to thank you all for tuning in. Have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the football. We'll talk to you once again Monday to break down Bills versus Jets. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.